Welcome to everyone who's joined for our quarterly live webinar. Thanks for taking the time to join us. We will end this session with a Q&A, so if you do have any questions, just pop those into the chat box and we'll be sure to get those answered at the end. We'll be making some forward-looking statements, so please do review these on our website, as well as our corporate deck and the various press releases for our different projects. Today's webinar, we're really going to focus on our uranium projects. We're going to update on Mermac and Strike. We had a news release this morning, and show how that's progressing toward drilling in 2024. And then we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive on our newly acquired uranium projects, where we've assembled a district-scale land package on the northern rim of the Athabasca Basin. Just by way of introduction, I'm Dale Vernon, the CEO. I've 20 years experience as a mining executive and exploration geologist. Prior to joining Fortune Bay, I was the VPX for Denison Mines, where together with the team, we discovered 70 million pounds of U3O8 in the Athabasca Basin. That was primarily from the Griffin deposit, a basement-hosted deposit, as well as the Husky deposit and some expansion at Phoenix. Also worked at uranium projects more globally, particularly in Africa, Namibia, Zambia, and Mali. And I'm going to use this to hand over to Gareth to introduce himself.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Gareth. I'm the Technical Director for Fortune Bay. I've got a pretty diverse background, spanning more than 20 years across the mining cycle. Most relevant here is that I worked as a consultant over the course of several years on the Fission, J-Zone, and Triple R deposits. Yeah, back to Dale.
Yeah, so today's talk's going to focus on the uranium part of our business, and we really are an emerging uranium explorer and project generator. Fortune Bay has had a strong presence in Saskatchewan since the company's formation in 2014, and that's due to the Goldfields gold project near Uranium City, right on the rim of that Athabasca Basin. Now, obviously, with Gareth and I coming on board in 2020, we have that uranium experience and saw just tremendous potential on that really underexplored northern rim of the Athabasca Basin. Soon after joining, we started putting together the Mermac and Strike projects, which were announced in 2021, and we got some work done on those in 2022. We've continued to look for opportunities, acquisitions at low cost that have high potential, and this has resulted in 5 new uranium projects, which we collectively call the Woods uranium projects, made up of the spruce, pine, aspen, birch, and fir projects. It's a clean energy space, so we thought indigenous trees of Saskatchewan were appropriate. And as we look forward beyond these projects, we continue eyeing opportunities. We've done some staking in other parts of the basin and are looking to assemble additional projects. Here's just a map of that Athabasca Basin in northern Saskatchewan, and showing the location of our Goldfields projects, still a very important asset for the company, but in blue, all our uranium projects, Strike and Mermac, and then moving to the east, the Woods uranium projects, which cover around 40,000 hectares. It's important just to note that a lot of the work done in the basin previously has been focused on that eastern side, and we see all those significant uranium deposits developments, and then a lot of activity more recently on the southwestern side around the Triple R and Arrow discoveries, but very little work done in recent times on that northern rim, where we see just tremendous potential. We're applying a concept on that northern rim that we feel has a potential to produce a significant discovery. The exploration target, we're just outside the basin, so we're looking for these shallow, high-grade deposits that sit within the basement rocks, and they're termed basement-hosted types or models. And what's unique about those is they have high grades, and they allow for conventional mining because they're in these competent basement rocks. As one moves further into the deeper parts of the basin, as you can see, they're covered by that Athabasca sandstone. There's tremendous potential, but a lot of these deposits never get mined, and that's because they sit below that water-saturated sandstone and are very costly and difficult to mine. And it's only the highest grade largest deposits that have actually become mines there, MacArthur River and Cigar Lake. So we feel chasing ideas just outside the basin has the potential to produce not only exploration results, but deposits that can become mines. Just looking at our concept on the right there, what's happened on that northern part of the basin is there's been a lot of historical exploration, and that primarily took place during the 1960s, 70s. And the model at the time was these beaver lodge type deposits. So explorers went about looking for these. They occur in granites and therefore typically outcropped. And what wasn't done in that northern part of the basin is looked at the graphitic rocks, which is the new model for these high-grade basement hosted deposits. And invariably, being graphite soft, as well as having structure in the form of faults, those would weather negatively, and they'll sit in the valleys and therefore are covered by valley fill, overburden, or sometimes small lakes. And therefore, they wouldn't have been amenable to those historical prospecting efforts and would have gone undetected. We've applied this concept at Strike and Mermac. There's these valleys there, and we've started drilling in them on these EM conductors that represent the graphites. And we've proven that that model applies. At Strike and Mermac, in all our drill holes, we've intersected strong graphite structure. We've seen the right signs that fluids have come through, in other words, the right types of alteration. And we have had some mineralized intercepts there, and follow-up is needed along strike of those. So that model's been validated at Strike and Mermac, and we're looking to take that across the east to the Woods uranium projects and apply it there with similar success. But we'll just touch on Strike and Mermac here and give you an update of where those projects are at. Here we are in the Uranium City area. Mermac and Strike are shown. And during our initial drilling in 2022, we did, as I said, hit these graphitic units and did come up with some mineralized intercepts. There haven't been any really significant grades or widths at this stage, but what's important is we've seen that these conductors or graphitic units are fertile. There's been fluids come through them, and therefore they have the potential to have a large high-grade basement hosted deposit. Just showing you in the blue stars are those initial intercepts of greater than 0.1% U3O8 over 0.1 meters. Across these Strike and Mermac, we've identified numerous high-priority targets that require drilling. Also shown here is Standard Uranium Sundog project, and that's relevant to the option agreement we've signed for Strike and Mermac. All those properties optioned by company Aero Energy Limited to form a district play in the Uranium City area. To give you a bit more color on that option agreement that was signed with Aero Energy, they're going to be they can earn up to 70% interest in both the Strike and Mermac projects for cash payments of 1.35 million, share payments of 2.15 million, and exploration expenditures of $6 million. What's important there is that in the event of discovery, Fortune Bay has significant upside with a 30% ownership in the projects, and all these expenditures will get carried for us, which means we don't have to dilute our shareholders. Aero's made significant progress on this option agreement, recently announcing a $5 million financing. The proceeds from the flow-through and charity flow-through will be sunk into the ground here. And we can see from the map on the right, Aero is really impressed with the targets we have at both Strike and Mermac, and we're going to be seeing some work there this year. It's certainly planned, subject to the financing, to see drilling start again, which will be really exciting for us and will create some additional news flow for Fortune Bay. Aero Energy has put together a fantastic technical advisory team. On that team is Garrett Ainsworth. He's been involved with the majority of the discoveries on the Patterson Lake Corridor, Triple R and Arrow. Also Galen McNamara, who's the CEO for Aero Energy, who worked with Garrett at Arrow as the NextGen's project manager. At the moment, Fortune Bay is working with their technical advisory team, and we're going through operational planning and technical planning with a view to starting drill programs at Strike and Mermac during 2024. Stepping away from Strike and Mermac, we're really excited by the new package of projects we've put together at the Woods. What's important is that across the basin, all the major discoveries have been made on huge structural zones. And there's one structural zone that really hasn't seen the amount of work as the others. If you look at those, the labeled structural zones, you'll see the amount of drilling that's been done on those through those small white dots, as well as obviously some of the discoveries that have been made, shown in yellow. What's notable about the Grease River Shear Zone is there's almost no drilling. You know, within 30 kilometers of the Athabasca Basin margin, there's less than 20 holes and only 3 drill holes on the entire land package that we've put together. The Grease River Shear Zone, it's a major structural zone, up to 7 kilometers wide, and it has numerous splays off to the north. It's highly underexplored. There's abundance of showings, which indicates there's a endowment of uranium in the area, including the Fond du Lac deposit, which sits on that structure and is the classic unconformity style deposit with mineralization in that sandstone as well as in the basement. The Grease River Shear Zone also has favorable geology. There's lots of mention of graphitic units, and we really feel this area is poised for discovery. The Grease River Shear Zone, just shown here in a little more detail, is fully staked, and there's numerous reputable operators which have recognized the potential along here. And in this uranium cycle, where we now see uranium at 16-year highs and trading, you know, with a spot price of just over $100 a pound, we're going to see some work along the Grease River Shear Zone. Fortune Bay has amassed a dominant land position within 30 kilometers of the Athabasca Basin margin along this shear zone, and really excited by the potential it offers for us to unlock value. What's probably the most exciting, one of the most exciting aspects about this project is the extreme lake sediment anomalism. The area of our projects has the highest lake sediment anomalies in Saskatchewan. If we look at the image on the left there, we can see very clearly that the lake sediment data, and this is a Geological Survey of Canada compilation for all the basement rocks. There's no sampling in the Athabasca Basin itself because obviously the mineralization occurs below that sandstone. But in the areas where the basin has been stripped off, we see a clear correlation between lake sediment anomalism and major structures, as well as with known uranium deposits. Zooming into our project area there, you know, with the scale adjusted here, just shows that these are the highest anomalies in Saskatchewan. The highest being at Heron Lake, which sits on our Aspen project, of 989 ppm uranium. And just to put that into context, many of the mines in the world operate at grades lower than that. So it's an extremely high value and does point to a potential source in the area. Obviously, no uranium deposits discovered there and almost no drilling to date. This just shows our project. And before I hand over to Gareth, just to mention the models here again, I mentioned earlier these Beaver Lodge style deposits, and that was certainly the focus in this area as well back in the 1960s and 70s, where prospectors used radiometric data to go in on the ground and look for this structure-hosted mineralization in granitic rocks, which typically outcropped. What was left untouched were the structural or graphitic zones, and those, as I mentioned earlier, they sit in the valleys. They simply haven't been prospected yet. We're within 30 kilometers of the Athabasca Basin boundary, and we have all this anomalism around and these uranium occurrences. The other model worth mentioning here is the Rossing type model. You know, I've worked a lot in Namibia on these types of deposits. They're magmatic uranium deposits, and those grades are typically 300 to 500 ppm for the mines. Bannerman's Etango project has a grade of 200 ppm. We see here these same type of rocks, these leucogranital pegmatites that have grades in excess of 500 ppm. And it's really a case of finding the right structural settings and finding the right volumes or tonnages of these rock types that carry that grade that could form a viable deposit, particularly in this elevated uranium price environment. I'm going to hand over to Gareth.
Yeah, hi everyone. So Dale has talked about the exploration concept and the model we're targeting here. I'll talk about the projects themselves, the exploration history, and some of the historical occurrences. As background, the major phases of exploration here were by SMDC in the late 1970s, and then in the period 2007-2008 by Can Alaska. There's been some other smaller scale work on a piecemeal basis by other operators, but these were the significant phases. And like Dale said, broadly speaking, the approach used for both of these phases was to rely on radiometric survey with prospecting and following up of the radiometric anomalies. So this exploration work identified numerous uranium anomalies. As we can see in the figure here, the little yellow triangles are the SMDI, the Saskatchewan Mineral Deposits Index uranium anomalies. And in these anomalies are mineralization examples that are consistent with both of our targeted models here. The Spruce project hosts about 6 kilometers of the Grease River Shear Zone. It has a best historical occurrence of fault-hosted, apparently hydrothermal type mineralization, which is what we're targeting, of up to 1.6% in a rock grab sample along one of these major structural splays. There also appears to be some rare earth element potential here with up to 3% total rare earth elements in an outcrop that was recorded as arcosic gneiss. So that's also something to keep an eye on for upside potential. Moving northeast, the Pine project hosts about 13 kilometers strike length of the shear zone, and there's also a significant proportion of this area that doesn't appear to have seen any airborne surveys since the 1970s. And this area lies along strike of several major splay structures along lithological contact zones that have been shown to be prospective in adjacent areas. The vast majority of these anomalies in adjacent areas were found through prospecting of airborne radiometric anomalies. And there are records of abundant uranium-bearing leucogranites and pegmatites, which are exactly the type of targets we're looking for this Rossing-style mineralization. The Aspen project hosts about 4.5 kilometers of shear zone strike length. And an interesting feature here, which is not actually shown in this image, which I'll talk about more separately later, that Dale mentioned, is the lake sediment anomalism and the possibility that these are indicating a local source of basement-hosted mineralization. But we'll talk more about that later. The birch and fir projects are areas off the main shear zone that we still see as prospective for basement-hosted mineralization, but they're probably better candidates for the lower grade, high volume Rossing type model. There are, again, numerous records of pegmatites with Rossing style grades that have been noted in historical exploration, and they haven't been properly assessed for continuity and volume because that just wasn't something people looked at in the past. Fir also has some rare earth potential. There are samples of up to 2.36% total rare earths, and of interest is that there was a pebble found in a low-lying swampy area that assayed at 55% uranium. So almost half that pebble is uranium, and no source for that rock was ever found. So we see all of these areas as interesting and worthy of follow-up for both of these model types that Dell was talking about. So that's a bit about the endowment. There's a lot more information on our website in the various project-specific pages if anyone wants to look at more of this. But in summary, all of the previous exploration in these areas, I think, has done a pretty good job of looking for Beaver Lodge-style mineralization with radiometric surveys and prospecting. But this concept that we're talking about here, chasing conductors undercover on major structures, it's never been properly explored. And to expand on this a bit, I want to talk about the geophysical surveys. In this image here, in the red outlines, we're looking at the 2007 EM radiometric survey outlines. And in this area, it's the only EM and radiometric work that's been done since before 1980. And there are limitations associated with this type of work, which if we can jump to the next slide, we'll talk about that a little. So we zoomed in on Spruce here to illustrate what I'm trying to show. This is a side-by-side comparison of conductivity images from airborne EM surveys. On the right-hand side is this 2007 data, which covers significant portions of our areas. This is EM from a fast-flying fixed-wing platform. It hasn't properly draped the topography, of which there's up to 200 meters vertical change in this area, which is significant. It's a very sensitive, very shallow penetrating system that's generated all sorts of anomalies related to clay, soils, lake sediments. It's primarily a structural mapping tool, and it won't have properly mapped out the basement conductors. And if you compare the image on the right with the image on the left, which is from a modern system flown in 2023 over an adjacent ground by another operator. So just to emphasize, we don't have this data. This was captured from a Forum Energy Metals news release from 2023. We're just using it to illustrate a point here. The new data are much quieter. and they pick out real features, allowing one to properly map basement conductors. So the new survey is also helicopter supported, so it can properly drape the terrain to actually effectively explore and map for the type of targets that we're looking for. Next slide. And to put that in the context of what's been done here in the past geophysically, that little block of new survey data from 2023 are shown in the far southwest there. All of the rest of the survey data that's shown here is that's all that there is from post-1980 EM and radiometric coverage. And this just highlights a clear opportunity here to continue along the Grease River shear zone and get new data like this to properly map in these conductors to allow us to properly target them. And then the EM and the radiometric component of that survey will also allow us to effectively explore for Rossing style deposits in the rest of the license area as well. Next slide. So I mentioned earlier that we'd come back to Aspen and the lake sediment anomalism, so a bit more on that now. This is a known anomaly that historical operators identified, and they actually took a look at the economic potential of the lake sediments themselves because the values are so enriched. Their values up to 1,870 ppm here. The area displays compelling structure. It also has highly anomalous muskeg samples. And the historical prospecting did note the presence of graphitic rocks in this area. And with all of this as background, no local source for these anomalies was actually found. And the thinking historically, when they gave up looking for local sources, was that these anomalies were created by constant leaching over geological time of uranium from background rocks into the lakes. The problem with this model is that they never found any really anomalous background rocks. There's one sample shown in the right-hand map there, from Canalaska in 2007 that returned 1,800 ppm uranium. But aside from that, the average content from rock sampling of these rocks is 7 parts per million. And that's very much in line with the radiometric survey results on the left there, which from blue to red on a sliding scale show 0 to less than 6 parts per million uranium. So there are areas elsewhere in Saskatchewan with background granites with higher uranium contents than this, and they don't generate these types of lake sediment anomalies. So there is a larger scale, broad lake sediment anomaly here that you could potentially explain by this leaching model, even if it is unusual. But within this broader, lower scale anomaly, this regional anomaly, there are a number of clear standout anomalies, and notably Perron Lake on the right-hand side there. The bright red samples there are over 1,000 parts per million uranium. And there are also some smaller lakes to the north and south of Perron Lake where there are common values over 500 parts per million. And at the very least, it's plausible to say that these could reflect local sources underlying the lakes. Jump onto the next slide, please. So focusing in on Perron Lake, which is one of these several anomalous lakes, previous operators did do some very limited pipe core sampling in this area. So they wedged a pipe through the lake sediments and then sampled the profile through the lake sediments. And in one instance, hole PLP1 in the north of Perron Lake, we see what we'd expect to see. So there's an increase in uranium content to the base of these very reducing organic rich sediments that capture uranium from the oxidizing surface waters. But in the other 3 cores, and there were only 4 of these done, in the other 3 cores in this cluster to the south, we see something different. The uranium content actually increases with depth into the less organic rich underlying clay sediments. So unfortunately, the pipe cores couldn't penetrate any further. So this is all the information we have. But again, can these types of locally variable, very highly enriched anomalies, of which there are several, not just Perron Lake, can these be adequately explained by a model of systematic background leaching? Or is this possibly indicating local sources under these lakes, conforming exactly with the type of exploration model that we're looking for here? It has all the right geological ingredients, and no proper EM survey has been done here, and no holes have been drilled. So this is an area we're particularly excited about going after, and I'll hand back over to Dale to talk more about what that would look like.
Yeah, so just wrapping up on these projects, the way forward and the next steps, we chasing these 2 models, the high grade unconformity related basement hosted model like Arrow, NextGen's large deposit. These areas haven't been explored effectively for them. The way forward here is, Gareth alluded to it, but really fast tracking exploration through VTEM surveying. That's an airborne, heliborne EM system. You can add to that the magnetics and radiometrics. That's going to give us really nice high-resolution data sets across all the properties. From that, we'll be able to identify the conductive zones and start to zoom in on potential areas of interest. But we'll also be doing that by then getting on the ground, doing field investigation and some geochemical sampling. We've shown that approach to be very effective at Mermac and Strike. Gravity can provide another additional layer to prioritize drill targets along the conductive zones. Gravity has the ability to identify these clay alteration zones that typically occur around these deposits. And then we will have all the right data sets to move to a drill testing phase. And I think drill testing could likely happen in the year 2 of following commencement of this project. So it's a really quick, fast-track way to be able to deliver some meaningful exploration results. The Rossing style model, I've spoken about that, how it just hasn't been looked at properly in the Saskatchewan context, and we're seeing the right grades in the right rock types to have a serious look at that. What's needed is to look for the right volumes or tonnages of those types of rocks to develop prospects for evaluation. There would obviously be covering those already with high resolution data, and the radiometrics from that survey is going to be particularly useful to map out zones of radioactivity, which can then we can use to look at it from a structural point of view. The Rossing type deposits occur in certain structural settings like pressure shadows around basement domes, structural intersections, splays along faults, where there's more space for these pegmatites or leucogranites to intrude in. We then look at those favorable structural settings, incorporate historical geochemical and radiometric results, and then be able to get in on the ground and actually examine these areas in more detail and be able to prioritize drill targets for testing. Well, that concludes the dive on the uranium projects. Just in wrapping up, some investment highlights for the company. We do believe we are poised for growth. We, firstly, underpinned by a significant gold resource base. We shouldn't forget the company has 2 significant assets at Goldfields and Exeter, together boasting just over 2.9 million ounces in gold resources. Goldfields are particularly important at this time. We completed a PEA on that in late 2022, using our upside case, which is at a $1950 an ounce gold price. That project produces an after-tax NPV of 460 million Canadian and an after-tax IRR of 50%. That's significant, and gold equities are obviously trading at record discounts to the price of bullion, and we believe it's the cyclical nature of the market. We're going to see gold equities re-rates given the outlook for gold, which remains certainly very positive. Gold's one great commodity, I think, to be in at the moment, but of course uranium is too. And uranium, we've seen 16-year highs on the uranium price going above $100 a pound. It's attracting a lot of interest in the commodity, particularly in stable jurisdictions, and Saskatchewan certainly ranks top amongst those. To have projects there presents us with massive upside through partner-funded exploration. And by that I mean it's a non-dilutive way for us to advance these projects, just like we've done at Strike and Mermac. And we see the ability to do something similar through the Woods package of properties, which is double the size of Strike and Mermac and boasts similar potential. We have an experienced board and management team. We're aligned with our shareholders with a significant insider ownership, a tight capital structure of just 46 million shares outstanding, and a highly attractive valuation given a market cap at only $9 million. And if you look at our gold assets together with our uranium portfolio, and even just look at where other uranium juniors trade that work in the basin, I think we offer a significant opportunity for investors. So that wraps it up. We will make a recording of this webinar available on our website and on our YouTube channel. If you want to share that with anyone, we'll continue with our quarterly updates, probably the next one being April. There's lots of avenues to reach us through our website, so please give us a shout if there are any questions at any stage. I'll just check if there are any questions. no questions. So I presume that means Gareth and I did a good job of explaining our uranium projects, and we look forward to touching base on the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.